Yes, I heard. They've been admitted.
Okay, can we get started?
Yes, of course, of course.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome our participants to this webinar. And so on behalf of everyone, I'd like to say a very big warm welcome to everyone. Today's session will be designed to provide very valuable insights, practical knowledge on an opportunity to engage with our experts, and that's CrowdStrike. It's meant to be a very interactive session, and feel free to ask questions in the course of the presentation. Thank you very much. All right, Catalina, over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to our session. We are very happy to be here and also to be able to connect to both our partners and the customers. Here, we are happy to actually share a little bit more insights of what we are seeing on the threat landscape for Nigeria, but also globally. And then we will dive into how we can protect this agentic era to be able to actually adopt any type of AI responsible within any of the organizations. The hosts for today is going to be myself, which I'm a solution architect for CrowdStrike. I've been with the company for about 2 years, working in the pre-sales role and connected for different markets in Europe as well as in META region, which includes, of course, also Africa. Alongside me, I have Aaron. So please, Aaron.
Thank you very much, Catalina. I'm Aaron. I'm on the same team as Catalina. We are colleagues, and happy to be here to kind of share more about the threats, which I will be doing so very briefly. So I guess I'll introduce myself more in greater detail when I get into my part. But back to you, Catalina, before we get started.
Amazing, amazing. So look, I want this session to be very interactive, okay? So whenever you may have questions, please raise your hand or send reactions, put your question in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will pick them all and try to address everything just to make sure that everyone is clarified with all the aspects that we are going to share with you. We'll start the presentation with Aaron for the threat landscape, and then we will move forward.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Catalina. So let me just share my screen, and I'm going to assume that my screen display is good to go. It should come up on everybody's monitor right now. Yep. Thank you, Catalina, for confirming. It's always helps. All right, so let's get started. Again, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for taking time from your precious day to join me today. At least it's almost the evening here in Singapore, where I'm originally from. It's for the next about 20 to 25 minutes, I'm going to be spending some time to talk about some of the key trends, threat trends, right, or trends related to the threat landscape, to the threat actors that we have seen, both globally and also some of the threat trends that are more specific to Nigeria and specific to the financial sector in Nigeria. So you can think of this conversation as kind of like two parts. We will begin with general threat trends, and then we will pivot into looking at some of the threat actors that have been observed by CrowdStrike to be active in Nigeria. So at any point in time, to Catalina's earlier point, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to do my best to kind of toggle between the presentation and the chat to see what comes up along the way. I think Catalina will help me to spot some of the questions.
Yes, I will help you. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catalina. So yeah, if there are any questions that I can take on live, I will do so at a convenient time. If not, before, I guess a convenient time is before I transit to Catalina. So before we do that transition, I'll take a quick look to see if there are any final questions. But along the way, if you have any questions at all, please drop them in the chat. I will check like I mentioned. And if I can take them live online, I will do so. And yeah, we'll do what best works for this crowd, and happy to get going. So let's get started. So like I promised, I'm gonna, I'm gonna offer a more elaborate introduction of myself. Aaron, originally from Singapore, currently based in Dubai, but because of the unfortunate situation in the Gulf, I've been back home in Singapore for the last couple of months. My background, actually, I've been at CrowdStrike for more than 5 years now. But I did the vast majority of my earlier career in the public sector, did traditional intelligence in the Singapore Armed Forces, in the Singapore military, and then helped to build the then nascent Cyber Command in Singapore before leaving for the private sector about 7 or 8 years ago. Actually, funny story, Catalina and I have quite a similar background. So she also started off in the public sector, but I'll leave for her to tell you her war stories at a more convenient time. And like I shared with her many times over, her stories are a lot more legitimate than mine. So please feel free to look her up and have a deeper conversation with her about her interesting earlier life, right? But that's me. In the time I've been at CrowdStrike, I'm currently in a pre-sales channel enablement capacity, but prior to this, I spent the first 2 years of my career as a specialist in threat intelligence, because that's kind of what I do for the large part of my career. So I'm deeply involved in conversations like this, where I go around the globe speaking to customers, to partners, to help them gain a deeper understanding of the threat landscape, gain a deeper understanding of how the threats are evolving, right? And of kind of staying ahead of the curve, and to maybe in order to be able to iterate, right, your security posture, iterate your security controls, right, to stay abreast with how the threats are evolving. So that's the goal of today's conversation, right, for the next 20 minutes or so. So any conversation that involves threat intelligence, I like to kind of begin with this founding philosophy that CrowdStrike ascribes to, right? This was a statement that was coined by one of our co-founders, Dmitry Eperovich, and he basically said that organizations today, right, don't have a malware problem, right? They have an adversary problem, right? And the key point here is about how, in order to have a holistic understanding of the cybersecurity challenges that we are currently facing today, right, we have to understand it from an adversary-centric approach, right? It's only when we understand the adversary, right, their intent and motivation, why are they motivated to attack our organization or a particular sector or a particular country, and then couple that understanding with an understanding of their tactics, techniques, and procedures, how they perform their attacks, whether is it through malware or through living off the land techniques and so on and so forth. The how behind that intrusion is only when we have this holistic understanding of the adversary, right? Then we are able to comprehensively protect our organizations from the scourge of the adversaries, the scourge of the threats today. May I ask for that individual to kind of go on mute so that we prevent any disruptions, please? Thank you so much. So let me just proceed on. So we have started the conversation around establishing the fact that having an adversary-centric approach is important. The natural question that then follows is, who are the adversaries? So at CrowdStrike, we have this simple classification or categorization of the adversaries. We group the adversaries into three main buckets. We have your nation-state adversaries, which are typically units that represent a country's military or intelligence agencies, and they perform their operations often in support of political espionage missions, in support of foreign policy decision making, strategic decision making that's aligned with a particular state's interests. So most commonly, when we talk about the nation states, we talk about the big four. So your Russian, China, your DPRK, and your Iranian actors. And then moving on, we have what we call your e-crime or financially motivated adversaries. These are your adversaries that do everything and anything for a financial gain. So think through the entire spectrum of financially motivated actors, from your initial access brokers to your phishing kit brokers to your ransomware operators, right? Any adversary that performs an attack, right, for a financially motivated intent can broadly be classified as an e-crime actor. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, right? If you are familiar with, for example, the DPRK actors, the North Korean actors, they predominantly perform their intrusions for financial gain today, but they are really more the exception to the rule. But just be aware of that difference. right? And then last but not least, we have our hacktivism or hacktivist adversaries. These are your adversaries that perform typically very highly visible attacks, like your website defacements, like your DDoS attacks. And the goal of these high visibility attacks is to drive visibility to their cause. Right? The cause could be a political ideology, it could be a socio-economical ideology, but the goal is to advocate, right, through their attacks for a particular set of causes. So now that we have established the three categories of adversaries, there's the question of, just how does the threat landscape look like today, right? So this is unfortunately how it looks like today. CrowdStrike is already tracking more north of 280 actors, and on top of that, we are tracking more than 150 malicious activity clusters. So for those of you who are new to the idea of an activity cluster, you can think of activity clusters as emerging adversaries. Right? We are just amidst gathering more information around them, perhaps around their physical identities, their physical location, other informations that confirm that they are a distinct entity before we graduate them to a fully fledged named adversary alongside the 280 plus named adversaries that we are currently tracking. So what this means is that if you can expect in about a year or 2 years time, many of these 150 activity clusters would join the 280 plus adversaries that we are currently already tracking. So what that means again is that in the course of about a year or 2 years from now, we will be tracking north of 400 named adversaries, right, that represent this ever-growing threat actor landscape. So what this means again is that attacks are not stopping, they are only accelerating, and I think we can all agree that we need to do a better job, right, with keeping up with protecting our organizations from this growing number of threat actors and threats. So moving on into one of the main matrices that CrowdStrike uses to measure the relative capability of the adversary, it's time for me to share the notion of breakout time. For those of you who may be familiar with CrowdStrike's content or information, we've been using breakout time as a relative measure of the speed of the adversary over the history of the company. So we basically track the breakout time of an adversary over a long period of time. In fact, every year we provide an update. And just to give you a sense of what breakout time is, I'll use the analogy of physical security. So for example, if you are entering a secure building, right, you typically go through a set of security checks upon entering the building. It typically takes a layered approach, right, with surveillance cameras, with security X-ray machine devices, security guards patrolling and surveilling the entrances, right? You'll go through a different layers of security checks, right, before you are able to securely enter the lobby of a building and then get to whichever meeting or whichever location you're getting to within that building. But for a moment, right, think about what that means if a malicious actor or a malicious insider is able to get through these different security checks or security layers and gets into the elevator and go into a particular location for them to perform, right, their malicious to achieve their malicious outcomes. Now, if you are the security personnel or you are the incident responder, you have to go into the building floor by floor, door to door, to figure out where the malicious actor have gone, what have they touched, and who did they interact with, right? And this process that I just described, this response that I just described, is actually just what we know as incident response, right, in the cybersecurity context. And this takes hundreds of hours, costs millions of dollars to investigate and eradicate the threat. So using this analogy of physical security, what is then breakout time? Breakout time is the time it takes, right, metaphorically, for the malicious actor to get from the front door to the elevator, right? And in the context of cybersecurity, that means from getting initial access to the first system somewhere in the environment, or getting to another identity, or getting into a different environment like cloud, right? And why this is important to us is because it has been empirically proven that once a malicious adversary has successfully achieved breakout, right, the intrusion becomes exponentially difficult to contain and stop, right? So what this means for a defender is that you want to be able to ensure that you can do your detection, your investigation, and your response, and ideally your remediation, all within the breakout time of an adversary. Because if you can't do that, that just means that you are slower than the adversary and you're just going to suffer very, very severe consequences. So with the definition of what breakout time is out of the way, let's look at how much the breakout time has shrunk over time. Right? In 2019, it took on average an adversary 582 minutes to achieve breakout. So if my math doesn't fail me, this is actually north of 9.5 hours, or sits around 9.5 hours. Right? And this is, in my opinion, quite an acceptable time, right? I think it's reasonable for any security operations team to be able to perform action, right, investigations and remediations within a 9.5 hour time frame. But shortly after, in 2021, we took this particular measure during the COVID-19 pandemic. It quickly shrunk to 98 minutes, so just north of 1.5 hours. And then just 1 year later, it became 79 minutes, right, already under the 1.5 hour mark. And then for those of you who have been following CrowdStrike's reporting, last year's global threat report, right, we have reported a average breakout time of 48 minutes. So adversaries have already now taken less than an hour to achieve breakout.
So I said, let me try from you.
Sorry,
Thank
is there
you.
a question right there? Okay, I'm just going to assume that that's an administrative instruction. So again, for those of you who are familiar with the global threat report this year, right, you would know that the current breakout time of the past year, it's at a startling 29 minutes, right? So I have two questions, right, for the audience to think about, right? First, I've already stated, right, today, right, are you able to perform your detection and basically response in under 29 minutes? If you can, good for you. If you can't, right, you want to start to rethink along, the aspects of the core aspects of people, process, and technology. What can you do, right, to get your detection and response times to comfortably under 30 minutes? It's important, which leads to my second question. Right? It is not only the objective measure of the breakout time. We also have to consider the rate of change of the breakout time. So if you look at what it was the year before, which was 48 minutes, right? And now it's 29 minutes, right? If my math doesn't fail me, that's actually a 19-minute reduction. So my second question to you is, have you achieved a 19-minute reduction in your detection and response capability over the past year? Right? Again, the answer is probably no, because I don't think there's anyone that I've actually asked this question personally told me that they were able to shrink, right, their detection and response time in by 20 minutes over the course of a year, unless there was already a deliberate project or deliberate effort in place to do so. But the point here is, you want to be able to keep pace with how fast the adversary is going. So not only do you have to consider the objective breakout time, but you also want to take into consideration the rate of change of the breakout time. And just when we thought it couldn't get any scarier, right, the fastest breakout time on record that we have tracked in the past year is actually 27 seconds. And that is down from 51 seconds in the previous year. Right? Again, we are not saying that every attack, right, is going to achieve breakout in 27 seconds, because if that's the case, it's honestly really, really very scary to be in cybersecurity. But at the same time, what does this mean, right? This means for us as defenders that at a very worst case scenario, the SOC potentially has to deal with a potential intrusion or an intrusion attempt twice every minute, right? I think many of us already are well aware of the problems with the SOC today, right? An incredible amount of work, how worn down the SOC team are, right? The common issues with burnout and alert fatigue, right? And then how all that compounds and leads to mistakes being made, right, by the SOC team. Right? All this is almost inevitable, but it's also really, really deeply, deeply challenging and unsettling. And what does this, with the adoption of AI, which we are going to also talk about, right, more adversaries are going to just use AI to enhance the pace of their intrusion. Right? So what this means is that the breakout time is only going to continue to decrease. And some are even contending that it's going to decrease very sharply, right, to a point where it may get to a few milliseconds, right, where it's machine speed breakout. So again, it begs the question, how should we be thinking about keeping pace with how fast the adversary is? How are we thinking about getting our defense posture, our existing security controls to operate at machine speed, right? So food for thought. Now we move into the some of the other statistics that we have we have arrived at, right, over the course of the past year in terms of the global threat report, right, beyond the breakout time, right, we have seen that there's, for example, on the AI front, there's an 89% increase from attacks that leverages AI, right. We will talk about what this means very shortly in greater detail, right. We have also seen the notion of cross-domain attacks. So adversaries starting from achieving initial access, perhaps with a stolen identity, and then using the identity to move into the victim's environment, or starting the attack by targeting the cloud environment, then moving into the on-prem environment, or vice versa, or conversely, by starting in the on-prem environment and moving in the cloud. Right, the notion of cross-domain attacks are on the up and up, right? And the one very, very worrying statistics is a 266% increase, right, in cross-domain attacks perpetrated by state nexus actors. Right, this is particularly worrying because what this means is that the adversaries, for a very long time, we know that adversaries learn from each other. And if you've been tracking the notion of cross-domain attacks, actually the concept of cross-domain attacks was sort of pioneered by the e-crime actors or the cyber criminals, right? Most prominently by Scattered Spider, right? But what this means is that adversaries are learning from each other, right? And now the state actors have taken notice of the effectiveness and the potential of a cross-domain attack and are now actively using these techniques, right, to successfully achieve their objectives. So these are some of the trends that you want to be concerned about, and I will go into some level of detail around what that means for all of us. So first, we talk about AI. Right? AI at the heart of what it truly is, right, in terms of the potential and the value that it offers to organization. Right, we can think of it at a very high level as a double-edged sword, right, because it offers many clear enhancements to employee and even customer productivity, right, which leads to its massive adoption and proliferation. But at the same time, the adoption of AI has led to severe risks, right, to the organization, right, in the form of in two ways, right, in expanding the attack surface to the adversary, because now it's an additional avenue, offers additional opportunity for the adversary to target an organization, and at the same time, it's also being weaponized by the adversary to improve their efficacy, their effectiveness of their attacks. When we look at how AI has been weaponized, there in the early days, right, there were kind of two main use cases. One is in the form of using it to support disinformation, misinformation, and also to a certain extent social engineering, right? A lot of content-based, content generation type use cases. So in this example, we have seen Renaissance Spider using, for example, generative AI to make the click fix lures that they use to target their victims and localizing them for the local context. So, for example, presenting the lures in a language that is tailored for a specific victim of a particular geography, right? And that has led to empirically proven way higher click-through rate of the lures. So it is shown to work, right? And at the same time, many adversaries, both nation states and hacktivist adversaries, have taken to using generative AI to generate content in the form of graphics and text, right, to drive disinformation and misinformation campaigns. But of course, right, if you've been following how the evolution of AI has been evolving in terms of how it's been weaponized by the adversary, it has changed also quite significantly over the past year. We have seen adversaries use it to develop and enhance the technical capabilities in different ways. First, we have seen adversaries using AI to generate scripts to help them with post-exploitation activities. So, the example that we have is Punk Spider, and we have seen Punk Spider interacting with generative AI, right, to get generative AI to generate scripts to help them with lateral movement and privilege escalation type actors. Right? And we have also seen some other examples of adversaries directly interacting with generative AI applications, asking for guidance, right, for support with post-exploitation activities. So an example of that would be, an adversary asking an open AI, for example, how, can you offer me commands, or what commands can I use, right, to attempt to authenticate, right, to the domain controller in my environment, right? And of course, the goal there is to get the living off the land command right? Maybe a PowerShell command, right, to perform the action, right, which they can then use to try to perform lateral movement in a victim environment. Apart from that, we have also seen AI being used alongside malware more synergistically, in a more synergistically way. So the example we have is Sparkcat, which is a malware that is used for mobile surveillance. And what this capability does, or how the malware developer has done with AI, is that they've integrated the AI with the optical character recognition technique. So once a successful infection has happened on an infected device, it will look up, the malware will look up all the pictures on the mobile device while being enhanced by generative AI, and then determining which files are then suitable or interesting, right, for subsequent exfiltration. And also, we have the example of Frantic Spider here, where we have now seen adversaries actually using AI to improve the technical competencies of the malware that they are using. So directly integrating AI into their malware development workflows. So that is a significant development in how adversaries, right, have used AI, right, in weaponizing their capabilities or enhancing their capabilities. Like I mentioned, AI unfortunately expands the attack surface of an organization. So these are two examples of how that manifests, right? For one, the first one, we have a very prolific ransomware group called the Kerber ransomware. They basically went and hit a AI platform that's being used quite commonly across enterprises. They found a vulnerability in Langflow, which is a low-code, no-code AI platform, and they directly exploited the vulnerability in that AI platform and use that vulnerability to eventually pivot in the environment and deploy ransomware in the target environment. And so going after AI platforms directly. Another interesting example, at least in my opinion, is a truly innovative example, right? Where the adversary leverages or exploits legitimate MCP servers, right? Legitimate AI infrastructure, right, to target an organization. So if you are familiar with Postmark, right, Postmark is basically an API for LLMs to interact with email, right, sending emails, getting statistics about email. So what a threat actor did in this particular case is that they created a malicious MCP server for Postmark, and how it works is such that every time the LLM sends an automated email, or part of the workflow sends an email, it will BCC the adversary. So just imagine, it's so simple, but it is so powerful, right? Because this is a very simple way to get visibility into what's happening in the environment, what the LLM is doing. And it's a very interesting and innovative way of performing reconnaissance, right, on a particular environment. And how many organizations will have a security control for such malicious activities associated with MCP servers behavior, right? I would hazard to say that the vast majority of organizations today do not have security controls in place to even detect or prevent such behaviors, right? So it's a very worrying case. And of course, we have also already seen what can truly be considered to be generative AI or AI-enabled malware, right? This is LameHuck, right? LameHuck is a malware framework that is being developed or was developed by Fancy Bear, which is one of the most prolific Russian-based adversaries. Is associated to the GRU, which is the military intelligence unit of the Russian military. And what's interesting about LameHuck is that LameHuck is not actually anything like traditional malware, right? It's not like, it doesn't have any pre-built malicious functionalities that, for example, allow a threat actor to upload files or execute files, right? Like a remote access tool. It is just a series of prompts and is connected to the Hugging Face API. So what happens is the victim would install what they think is a legitimate installer for Python, right? And then the tool uses prompts to reach out to the Hugging Face API, asking it to give it shortcuts, right? But when you look at what the prompts are, the first prompt is really the adversary wanting to profile the system and asking the Hugging Face API to give the user, in this case the adversary, the necessary Windows commands to do so. The second prompt is really about the adversary wanting to find everything in the environment that is potentially valuable and bundle it to be ready for exfiltration. Right? So if you think about this tactic, it is truly a very innovative way of avoiding detection. Because if the adversary, if the victim or the target does not have some kind of quote unquote man in the middling or machine in the middling type tactics that control in place that intercepts and inspects the prompts, right, and the input and output, right, there will be no detection, right, of this kind of malicious or suspicious activity that's taking place in the environment. So we expect more of such techniques to be adopted, right, by adversaries in the near future. So if you are actively using generative AI today in your workplace, right, this is something that you want to be genuinely concerned with, and you want to start thinking about how you want to you want to implement, right, the right process and technologies, right, to be able to detect for such misuse and abuse of generative AI in your environment, potentially by an adversary. So moving on, I want to spend some time talking about some of the other key trends, right? So ransomware, unfortunately, show no signs of stopping. The interesting point that I just want to make here is that not only is ransomware, perpetrating, right? The important point here is that just like what I talked about earlier in terms of some of the statistics that we've seen around cross-domain attacks, right? Ransomware attackers are also using cross-domain tactics, right, to be able to perform their intrusions successfully. They are exploiting the same visibility gaps, right, that typically found in the security stack of an organization, and exploiting those gaps to be able to perform a successful cross-domain attack. And cross-domain attacks have become proliferated so much that they actually almost have some level of consistency now, right? Typically, it works like this. The adversary will gain access via some kind of unmanaged device, and then with initial access, they will then target credentials and use these credentials to move laterally, typically either through some kind of single sign-on or identity federation service, or through a VPN that they have already found access to. And then they will try to target some kind of virtualized environment. And in many cases, once they have done so, they will spin up their own virtualized systems within the hypervisor so that they can use that as a bastion to do other activities within the environment. In some cases where we find a more sophisticated or more innovative adversary, they will go the extra mile to find a deprovisioned or even an inactive host, and they will actually spin that host back up so that it is even less detectable, right? They blend in even better, they blend in even better in the victim's environment, and then use that host as the bastion. And then ultimately, just like how you typically would find in a ransomware attack, right? The goal would be, sensitive data is being stolen or being encrypted, right? Or in many cases, both the unthinkable happens, right? Exfiltration, then encryption for extortion. Another key point, and this is the last key trend that I will cover very briefly before we go into a short second segment about some of the key adversaries that we've observed in Nigeria. The last key point that I want to make here is about how adversaries continue to exploit the cloud environment, right? So this is on top of the trend I spoke about earlier. If your eyes were caught the specific statistics, right? We observe a 37% increase in cloud intrusions over the past year, right? And a large part of this increase is actually a function of the nation states, right? Making the observation and consciously going after the cloud. So we want, if you have been as part of your digital transformation journey, you have been migrating your crown jewels into the cloud, right? The common logic, right, is very simple. Adversaries would fundamentally always go of an organization. So if your crown jewels are in the cloud, you would expect, right, the adversaries to follow and start targeting your cloud environments. So you want to think about how you want to protect, right, all these different domains that exist in your environment, and you also want to think about how you want to protect the different identities, right, that exist in these different domains, right, whether the cloud, your on-prem, and if you are thinking about agentic systems, you are thinking about AI agents, you also want to think about your non-human identities. So you want to protect your domains, the assets that exist in your environment, and also the identities that exist within those different domains in your organization. So let me just do a quick pivot and spend the next couple of moments talking about some of the key adversaries that we have observed to be targeting entities in Nigeria. And for the context of this conversation, I've picked, right, not only the adversaries that have observed to be targeting or targeted Nigeria, I've also handpick the adversaries that have gone after the financial sector in Nigeria, right? Which is going to be, in my understanding, to be very specific to this particular audience that we have today. First, I will begin with Genesis Panda. Genesis Panda, as its name suggests, is a panda. So a panda is the cryptonym that we use to attribute China and Nexus adversaries. So this is a Chinese-based adversary. This adversary is known for high volume intelligence collection. It actually it's been active since 2024, and we actually first observed Genesis Panda targeting a Nigerian entity in November of 2024, and it basically, as a typical Chinese based adversary, it's the activity or the intrusion started from targeting an unmanaged host, and then the adversary uses living off the land techniques, typically leveraging WMIC, right, Windows Management Instrument, right, to deploy their shells, to perform reconnaissance, right, and then go ahead and then install their implants, right. In this case, this shell known as V shell and this tool known as stowaway. Right, these are some of the more technical details around the specific intrusion that we have first observed, right? Genesis Panda targeting an entity in Nigeria, right? And this adversary has continued to maintain a very high volume of operations, and have expanded their targeting across a very wide swath of sectors. So something to take note here is that we typically think about an adversary that is motivated by political espionage to primarily target the public sector, right, the government. That is true, but at the same time, the Chinese adversaries have also targeted, basically any sector that has a large amount of personal information, sensitive personal data, PII, right? That would be, you can assume that sector, if you behave if you operate in a sector like this, you are fair game, right, for the Chinese target, right, for Chinese targeting, which is why we have seen financial services, traditional financial institutions, even like financial fintech or micro banks or microfinancing type sectors increasingly being targeted, right, by the Chinese nexus globally. So again, if the Chinese actors are not on your radar already, you want to pay some attention to them. Another state nexus adversary that probably many of you would be familiar with is famous Cholima, or otherwise known as DPRK IT workers. Right? They are an adversary that is fundamentally financially motivated. And what is interesting about them, if you're not really familiar with them, is that they would actually social engineer their way into legitimate organizations and get hired as legitimate employees. And they will earn, quote unquote, the honest salary from doing the job that they actually been interviewed for and hired for. But the vast majority of the salary that they earn actually goes back to the munitions industry department, the MID in the DPRK government. And for those of you who may not be familiar, the MID is directly responsible for the long range missile program, or the ICBM program, right, in the DPRK government. So any ill-gotten gains that this actor gets, right, is directly funding, right, the missile or the nuclear ambitions of the North Korean government. I can go on for hours to talk about famous Cholima. In fact, I've already done at the height of their activity, I delivered an hour-long webinar just on famous Cholima alone. So I think there's a recording somewhere of it out there. If you are curious, you can look me up separately. I'm more than happy to point you to that webinar. But there's also a lot out there that is available around famous Cholima, and famous Cholima has already demonstrated, right, target of a history of targeting entities within Nigeria. So yeah, look out for this adversary too. They are still very much active. Another adversary to be conscious of is the ransomware in totality. So as many of you would probably be aware, ransomware continues to be a big problem in Nigeria. I just listed the 4 main adversaries, or spiders as we call them. Spiders is the cryptonym that we use for financially motivated criminal groups. Right? These 4 adversaries, these 4 spiders, Revenant, Royal, Traveling, and Vice, are the 4 top ransomware operators that we have observed to have a known track record of targeting organizations in Nigeria. So you want to continue to keep tabs with how ransomware actors are active, which ones are active, and how are they evolving their tactics and techniques, right? Like I earlier alluded to with cross-domain attacks. And you want to be able to stay ahead, right, of how their tactics and techniques are evolving, so that you can continue to stay effective ahead of the threat. We also have this financially motivated adversary called Aviator Spider. They are a high volume spam-based type of actor. They are, in my opinion, interesting to this audience because we have empirically proven that they are actually an adversary that is physically based in Nigeria. And they are called Aviator Spider because many of their key members of this criminal group used to work in the aviation sector. So they actually started their targeting in their initial targeting on the aerospace industry because that's the industry that they are familiar with. But over time, right, that has also grown, right, in terms of victimology, sector targeting, it has grown beyond the aviation sector, and they have basically targeted many other adjacent sectors, and not only within Nigeria but globally. Right. So they start with a simple social engineering type mass spam phishing email attack, and then it then leads on to the deployment of a commodity rat or info stealer. So it's not the most sophisticated actor out there, more like a spray and pray type of adversary. But because of how high volume and how opportunistic they have been, they have caused a significant amount of damage, right, to enterprises, to the common user, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, we have this adversary called Solar Spider. Solar Spider is what I consider to be almost traditional financially motivated adversary. They are targeted, so they only target financial institutions. And I've been tracking Solar Spider since they first appeared in 2018. And what is interesting is that they first targeted financial institutions in Southeast Asia, where I'm originally from, but they have actually pivoted to the Middle East and Africa in the last 3 years. And why are they so successful? Because the phishing emails that they use are highly sophisticated. So they do a lot of research on their phishing attempts, and they actually use legitimate compromised emails to deliver, right, their phishing emails. So for that reason, because it exploits, right, trust really well, the click-through rate of their phishing emails is a lot higher, despite the volume of the attacks being a lot lower. And they rely primarily on this remote access tool called JS Outprox. They consistently upgrade their JX Outprox on a continuous basis, and they have continued to maintain a very steady operational tempo over time. So they are not an adversary that you typically would see on mainstream media because they are quite low volume in terms of activity, but they are steady, but the pace of operations is steady, and they are highly effective. So if you operate in the financial institution space, which I believe everyone on this call is, this is the adversary that you want to be concerned with. This is the adversary you want to pay attention to. And yeah, if this is the first time you're hearing about Solar Spider, I strongly encourage you to learn more about what this adversary is about and some of its recent activities and its capabilities so that you can effectively defend your organization from this particular adversary. So with that, I will now hand off to Catalina for her to share, we basically talked about the problem, right? So we are hoping that as CrowdStrike, we can offer you some of the solutions, right, to these problems and challenges that we talked about. But just one final point, if you haven't read the 2026 Global Threat Report, right, this is the QR code where you can scan to get the report. I'm sorry for the animation, but you can also download it from the website of CrowdStrike. And with that, thank you so much for your attention. I will now hand over to Catalina.
Thank you, Aaron. So far, I don't see that we have any type of questions from the audience. To be honest, it was interesting to learn about Aviator Spider. So if actually, since this e-crime group is based in Nigeria, I'm wondering if these guys are also targeting Nigerian enterprises. That can be like quite curious, or they are mostly orientated to make money from different places. I hope they don't, but at least now we have better understanding about the things that may target our end customers or potential customers in Nigeria today. So thank you, Aaron, for sharing that.
Thank you.
Amazing. So I will start sharing my screen so we can discuss a little bit more about what we can do to support our customers to protect against these emerging threats, right? So for everything that we have, we've discussed about AI era, right? Where adversaries are adopting it very fast. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Catalina, your screen share is good to go.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So now that we learned how we need to protect and what our adversaries are actively doing against our customers, we should also discuss about what are the means for them, for the organizations, to actually build their security resilience and also to make sure that they are increasing their security posture overall. Now, we've seen that the AI is dominating the headlines and the adversaries are adopting it very fast. We just seen exactly how the trend landscape is moving from one direction to another. But one conclusion is for sure is the fact that AI is changing specifically the threats that we are facing on a daily basis. Now, CrowdStrike in general, as a vendor, is heavily known in the market for endpoint security, right? Or for services when it comes to incident response and managed threat hunting or SOC as a services. However, what we are doing with our technology is making sure that we are providing everything when it comes to visibility and control for all the most core or focused functions that we see in the SOC. So if you look in this specific overview, you will see that we touch security, for example, for endpoint, for cloud. We have threat intel, then we have SaaS security, we have browser security, right? So different type of vulnerability assessment, data protection. So the capabilities expand as the attack surface expands as well. But most importantly, because we've discussed about breakout time, right? 27 seconds. that's quite impossible. We need to have machine speed, right, to respond to such threats. Or the average time that someone in an organization has to be able to actively investigate and respond to that threat. We understood that on top of our technology, we need to deliver agentic SOC. That's why overall you will see Charlotte AI powering the automation and orchestration that we have built internally in our environment. So this type of agents that will enable the business or the SOC teams to operate as well as machine speed and to be able to respond in such concerns. But yeah, I would like to go back a little bit to this slide, Aaron, that you just shared with the team, because there's two things that we want to discuss. One of the main topics that we had for this session is to identify strategies on how our customers can enable responsible AI adoption. We may see customers that will adopt AI to be able to respond to the threats, but also most of the organizations are actively using AI to be able to increase their efficiency internally, right? So here is just a different scope at all. So I'm going to address both of these items. So it's going to be one of the first strategy. If you are that customer that is looking to actually build an AI native SOC, you are right in the in the spot here in the session, because we are going to discuss a little bit on how on top of the technology, it's important to also have the agentic response. On the other side, if you are one of the customers that is already putting a lot of effort to have, let's say, AI usage, like even the simple Copilot from Microsoft or Gemini or other AI agents, or you are building your own AI agents in the banking sector, I'm pretty sure that everyone here in the room has a chatbot, right, that interacts with your end customers. And in that chatbot, you are using some LLM models to be able to increase the efficiency of the response. So if you are doing that, then for responsible AI, we need to discuss about how you are securing this AI adoption as well. So we'll start first with the AI native SOC approach. For that, we will focus on data ingestion, on identify and prioritize threats, and of course, most importantly, the threat response. So now building an AI native SOC, even though it's a buzzword, is definitely a journey. It's taking time And it also depends on the maturity that you have in the organization, but most importantly, on the resources that you have. And I don't speak here only on financial resources. I also reference the people, right? Because they make the difference when it comes to how you are securing the environment. Now, in the center of this story with the SOC, there's always like the CM story, because we understand that everything that comes in a critical way when it comes to security threats needs to be centralized somewhere, and the SOC team to be able to actually respond to those threats and staying ahead of the adversaries' activities. Now, if we were to think what the CM solutions and AI have in common, that is very simple. Both of them have data ingestion at scale. So the CM solution consumes massive volumes of data, same does AI. So what if we are powering the CM solution by leveraging the AI native approach? On the other side, both of these solutions need to have pattern recognition. That means they need to be able to identify potential trends and correlate that data. In the same time, we need to have alerting and response, right? So both AI and a CM solution needs to be able to actually generate actionable insights and provide value to the team. Now, if we combine these two capabilities, that will make like the perfect story, right? We will have the power of CM, which provides us the full visibility across the network. But in the same time, we will have the scale of what an AI engine can actually do for that specific CM solution. So this is also what we are trying to educate our customers as well. The story starts with data ingestion. So how sure are you that the data that you are ingesting today, it's also a data that is actionable and is allowing you to actively identify the threats, right? We've been speaking about them, but how fast are you able to know if it's someone that is targeting your environment, and how fast or how much time is taking you to actively respond? And if you are to imagine that and to try to respond to this question, you'll always come in mind to the coverage, right? To the visibility, because the journey starts first with the telemetry. So our approach for the CM part is actually a little bit more expanded or more complex than other products in the market. We start with first party coverage. That means what we are able to deliver via the agent telemetry collection. Right now, we want to make sure for the first party telemetry, with the fact that we have full visibility of our CrowdStrike customer environments. That means that we need to be able to accommodate the infrastructure, so the endpoints, the cloud environment, if we are discussing about customers that have both on-prem or cloud environment, or if they have like hybrid environment. But in the same time, we also need to make sure that we have full visibility into identities, because there is always a person that is managing that specific endpoint. No matter if it is a real person just like you, right? Or if it is a service account or a programmatic user that is being used on a daily basis to manage some server side. But still, if we don't have this type of visibility, it will be very hard for us to understand if we do have an active intrusion within our environment. So what we have done is to power up one single agent that is being deployed across the entire infrastructure. For those of you that will resonate the message when it comes to endpoint security, because the journey starts here. Now, everything that is happening during an attack, it's going to happen specifically on the endpoint. Now, there is one thing, because we've been discussing about AI in general. Every security vendor today will claim that they are using AI. But there is a fundamental question that you can ask them. Are you actively using AI to be able to gain visibility? How are you training your AI? Because it's a difference when it comes to preventing the threats before they execute, and just talking about how you are building your different AI models and everything internally for that specific solution. Now, if I were to compare with our, let's say, approach internally for the endpoint protection, every Falcon agent is being equipped with this powerful model internally that runs locally to be able to deliver millisecond detection and prevention. And this is not something that we are speaking about or bragging about. If you look on the validation that we have in the market, you will see that for endpoint security specifically, we are for 6 years in a row the leader in the Magic Quadrant among the leaders. So for sure, we are doing the things that we should do. In the same time, any customer, they will purchase an antivirus solution or an endpoint security solution because first and foremost, they want to feel protected, right? For that, we do have validations. So when it comes to MITRE evaluation from last year, which was the most complex exercise that they've done so far, we've seen that we have 100% detection and protection capabilities. But now why? Why we are able to do that? Specifically because everything that we have embedded on the machine learning capabilities and the AI models are powering millisecond detection and prevention capabilities. It's not just about focusing on known threats. It's identifying those behaviors or micro behaviors or different attack patterns that may target your environment that are very, very hard to catch, right? So every Falcon agent needs to be equipped that, and this represents like the power of crowd, of us being able to actually cross-check and have this full visibility across the environment. Now, this is the first party data. It means that we start by installing the agent across any type of system. You will see different aspects in the first party data when it comes to workstations, right? Mobile devices, server side, even IoT. Okay, so different flavors of the environment. We may have Linux, we may have Mac, we may have Windows systems. These models are designed to highly accurate and analyze a prioritized set of, let's say, features that can tell us specifically if there is an active threat and to be able to actively detect it and prevent it as well. Now, if we have the coverage itself, even for customers that have legacy environment, let's say maybe it's not your situation, or maybe you recognize these instances when you have some certain, let's say Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8, right? Legacy environment that you have, and you don't feel like you have the right means to be able to protect that, we would be able to also install the Falcon agent for the legacy environment to make sure that we are accommodating this security need. Now, we've been speaking about the infrastructure, so the hardware, right? The physical part. But let's also discuss about the people, because 80% of cyber attacks today are actively starting due to a compromised credential. So if you are to track specifically the attacks, you'll see that this is the primary attack vector. It's not just because they someone is neglecting or they don't have like enough cybersecurity, let's say, education. It's just because attackers are very, very stealthy, and they are no longer breaking in into the customer environment. They are actively logging in. So they are trying to collect those credentials that will enable them to get access and just behave like they are in their normal environment. But the problem is with the fact that modern identity involves multiple categories. So we will have the human identities, like real persons, but among these real persons, it's going to have like our employees, our contractors, right? Those employees will have like administrative level, or they may be only local users. So it's already becoming complicated for us to understand. But on the other side, now we have non-identities, non-human identities, sorry. This is like service accounts or any API connection, or any type of programmatic user that you are leveraging on a daily basis for scripting or automation. But imagine that on top of that, as organizations start to adopt AI, we are also speaking about AI identities. Because every AI agent or every automated workflow that you are building internally in your organization does have an associated identity and also certain privileges that comes alongside that identity. So if you were to look about it, you will see that an average enterprise, and maybe you also identify yourself in this situation, they have 10 times more non-human identities than human persons. That means authentication tokens, service accounts, API keys. So the type of identities that an attacker will look like in order to be able to identify those credentials, because that type of category of data is rarely monitored by our customers. They don't invest that much time in order to identify, okay, I have this particular service account, what type of privileges they have. Are they overprivileged? Or they are not monitoring if their passwords have been rotated. Or even they may have like domain controller servers where multiple administrators are sharing the same password. So that means that the customer itself or the security team right now has the, let's say, the responsibility to get that specific complete identity visibility across their environment. Now, this is another part of the first party telemetry, knowing your identities. For that, in our case, we are going to use the Next-Gen Identity Security, which basically means installing our Falcon agent, particularly on the domain controller server, and starting collecting data that we need, doing the profiling, identifying specifically what is a common threat, what is the common behavior, if there are any spikes in the activities, and of course, making sure that we see every identity everywhere, no matter if it is on-prem, no matter if you are using Entra-ID or if you are using, I don't know, AWS IAM solutions or SaaS applications or AI agents, we need to have this complete visibility with no blind spots across your entire infrastructure. Now that we are securing the endpoint, so the hardware, and we focus also on identity, we can say that in this journey, the only thing that we need to also focus on is identifying the attack surface. So this is the fundamental challenge for any security organization today, because they cannot defend something that they don't know it exists, right? Attackers today are spending days, maybe even weeks. There are APT groups that are spending actually months quietly mapping every customer environment. They try to identify any vulnerability, any misconfiguration, any exposed asset over the internet that they can easily exploit. This is the type of process that they are doing before even launching an attack against someone. So imagine if they are investing that much time to be able to do this type of attack. Imagine how much time it's taking you actually, you as a customer with your own security team, to react to such threat, because they've documented so well the network that sometimes even for the customer is a challenge to understand what happened in their environment because they don't have this full attack surface visibility there. So the core philosophy here, now that I know the asset, I know the people, the next question would be, do I know my vulnerabilities? Do I know where I can be exploited? Do I know what to prioritize for patching process? But the problem here is like a philosophy shift, because you guys today are asking most probably, how many vulnerabilities do I have? I think it's a very common question for anyone that is a SOC manager, that is a CISO or a CTO or someone that is owning the program for vulnerability management. They are asking on a daily basis, how many vulnerabilities do we have? But the question here should be, what can an attacker actually exploit from my environment? How would they use it? What do I need to do to be able to fix it? Because if I'm focusing on the vulnerability only, I'm going to struggle. We will see like 0-day vulnerabilities on a daily basis. And you know that because you are doing this, you are a practitioner. You know very well what type of vulnerabilities you have in your environment. But if I am to do that, to try to patch them, it's going to be like overwhelming. Think about the past few months when everyone spoke about Mistral, right? The AI massive agent that is able now within seconds to spot out like different vulnerabilities that nobody was aware of. So that's the shift. You will see that type of technology that will come into our security space, and we will start discussing about it, and we will struggle because we are not focusing on the problem. Okay, so for shifting that, our approach is, okay, let us understand the attack surface that we have. Let us prioritize the risk, but that prioritization should always come to a prioritization from the adversary standard point. And in the same time, I need to understand what is the asset criticality in my environment. Am I paying attention to those assets that are actively storing the sensitive data of my organization? Or I'm just trying to patch a workstation that a contractor is using. So that's the different approach that we have in mind for exposure management. But in the same time, we've been speaking about cross-domain attacks. That means that as part of this process, when it comes to prioritization, we also need to have the concept of reducing lateral movement. I need to understand that if I am getting compromised today, because unfortunately we are in this business, both us as a vendor and you as a customer working for cybersecurity, because cyber attacks are happening, right? So that's why we are here. But if it's to happen to me, how easy would be for me to be able to contain the threat? And for that, I need to understand lateral movement risk. So if I have my host compromised, does my host is directly connected to a specific server? Is my host accessed by certain, let's say, employees that have high privileges that will enable them to access different risk exposure resources from my environment? If I'm asking myself this question, then I am on the right track to identify the full exposure management. This is what we are also trying to accomplish on our end as well. So now, if I go back for the first party coverage, for us, our approach, let's say for security, is having insights on on-prem environment, cloud environment, identities, but also analyzing the risk with exposure management. This represents like the core business solution that we offer to all of our customers. Now, we were speaking about CM. So when we have CM, it's not just about our technology. It's about also the technology that you are leveraging on a daily basis. We have customers that will share with us that, look, I'm using like 10 or 15 different security solutions to secure my environment. What can I do with those? We are just fine. I mean, you are on the spot where you need to understand, you need to have like consolidation view. And that's when the story of NGSIM comes in, because we as a vendor, we provide the focus on the SOC services, but you will also have a firewall solution, right? A web application solution. You will have like the email security solution. For that, we open the ecosystem. We want you to be able to bring that telemetry in the CM platform, and of course to enable our customers to easily ingest that third-party sources to speed up the investigation process. So for the approach itself for NGCM, we start first and foremost with understanding that the customer needs to focus on investigation. Our NGSIM product is not about log management. We don't want to have like 100 sources staying in with different or massive, I don't know, terabytes of data, right, in the CM solution. And for you as an end customer to struggle to understand which of those data are actively telling me that I do have a problem in my environment. No, that's not our approach. We want to make sure that everything that you bring in stays in this consolidated platform, but it's also actionable when you are trying to get visibility and control during an investigation and remediation process. So for any customer that it's CrowdStrike customer, when they start their journey with us, specifically most of them start through the endpoint security part, and they extend step by step into adopting the SOC business with the AI native SOC. All of our customers are receiving 10 gigabytes log ingestion per day from third-party sources for free. That means that when they onboard into the platform, if they want to bring, I don't know, email security logs from Microsoft, from Mimecast, or from Proofpoint, or whatsoever vendor that they are using for their email security stack, they can bring that in. But most importantly, once they have this process, like easy adoption, they will be able to see that out of the box, the correlation rule will speed up the process. So it means that once they start to shift in bringing in everything in the data, they will be able to rely on the fact that the data is getting unified. Because we will have all the security telemetry into one place, but first and foremost, that security telemetry, it's that specific data that helps me to hunt and detect security threats. So for the customer that is consuming like Energy SIEM technology and understands the shift in doing that, they will always ask us, okay, but how are you leveraging like AI to superpower this combination? So first and foremost, you should know that everything when it comes to correlation rules and detections itself are powered by machine learning models trained on our full data set across our entire customer base. For you to understand the customer base that we have in our environment, imagine the fact that CrowdStrike sells today in more than 186 countries, and we are the largest deployed endpoint security solution. So that means that the telemetry that we get help us to build those detection engineering profiles to stop the breach, not just know about it, to also stop it. So that type of data is being transformed into be able to build those AI-powered detections also on top of Energy SIEM. So when you start bringing the data from the third-party telemetry, we are unifying it in your dedicated cloud environment. We are going to query through the data in order to understand the shifts right on the attack patterns or the TTPs or some abnormal activity that have been reported not only by us with the agent, but also by the third-party sources that you brought in. And on top of it, of course, we need to put automation. And automation comes from the built-in SOAR product, which is natively integrated. So for example, for those of you that are not aware, Fusion SOAR, which is our security orchestration and automation response solution, is in the platform, but is provided for free. And at the same time is going to communicate also with first-party data that is, of course, available in the platform, but you can also action other resources on the third-party connection. We will see that in practice as well, but what is important for you to understand is that we don't offer a standalone product for SOAR only, and we don't put a subscription or an associated cost with it. By default, since we started this journey in 2011, we've put SOAR embedded in the product and available to all of our customers, no matter the level of subscription that they have. Now, what it means for you in the investigation process. It means that for each stage of the attack, you will rely on sensor-based machine learning capabilities, cloud-based machine learning capabilities. Of course, we will have the classical IOCs that you guys are mostly resonating with when it comes to antivirus solutions, but the focus is shifting particularly to indicators of attack. So those specific indicators that will tell us that this type of behavior is emerging in your security organization. because this type of particular pattern is an indication that someone may try to get access into. But in the same time, it can evaluate if there is an active threat already. But when you complement that with the power of the NG-SIEM in order to identify the third-party telemetry, that will augment the detection infidelity because of the correlation rules. Because we will have this access from both first-party and third-party telemetry to be able to assign what we call behavioral composition. And that makes the difference from a vendor that can stop an attack, but that attack is a never seen before pattern or fileless attack or living off the land techniques, and the vendor that fully focused on signature-based and indicators of compromised behavior. Now, I want you guys to also understand the next shift. Let's say today we have finalized the data onboarding process and we are comfortable enough with the data foundations because that specific telemetry is what is going to add us the value that we need to understand what we need to protect in our environment. But what is the customer experience when it comes to identify and prioritize against the threat? I'm going to walk you through a short demo for you to understand particularly what is the experience of our customers today and where we play with the AI. So first and foremost, you will see in this short video the fact that the detections itself are all cumulated in NG-SIEM. So we start the story with endpoint security. But as I've mentioned, any customer that onboards in this journey, by default, they get NG-SIEM capabilities on top with no additional cost to it. But the thing that actually supports our investigation process is the fact that we connect the dots. So it means that I may have in different categories detections coming from email, from endpoint, from web, from identity, from cloud. So I can see in a single place, particularly from all the environment, the detection experience that I have and I need to focus on. Then, of course, I need to put AI on top of it when it comes to risk score or risk assessment or criticality level in order for the security analyst to stay focused on what matters the most. Now, if we are to select the detections that actively need a response from our SOC team, we always map it with the MITRE framework. Why? Because it's telling us at which pace of the attack we are, and most importantly, where we have critical attack surface that we need to address. Imagine that you are in the step of OS credential dumping. It means that the attacker has persistence in your environment and it's already starting to achieve credential collections from the targeted host. And that's how you're shifting your full investigation in the right detection part to be able to also contain the threat. As we move into, of course, we can classify and consolidate the detection in a unified incident by just selecting the aspects that matter the most. I can start my investigation from the endpoint level, but I can also go on the identity part. Identities that can represent identities that are protected by the Falcon agent itself, or from the third-party telemetry, like for example, information coming from Zscaler, or from Abnormal Security, or from Microsoft. Once I dive into the investigation, and I want to understand specifically how this user is connected to that particular event, I have what is called Incident Workbench. That means that this is like the graphical interface where I have like a clear visualization of everything that it comes to the attack, specific steps and connections with everything that was executed on that specific system. No matter if we are discussing about a single system or multiple systems that are connected as part of the investigation. There is one indication here that you should be aware of, the fact that here we have indicators that are coming from endpoint, from identity, but most importantly also that are coming directly from SIEM. In addition to that, this can be considered like a war room. So all the SOC analysts that are actively participating in the investigation can see the same interface and collaborate and work together directly here on the event. There's no need for them to pivot out to identify what is the email security solution providing me as an additional resource. This saves time and increase efficiency. Now, as we move forward, we will see that for each of that specific threat that we are focusing on, we have on top in the SIEM experience the enrichment with our threat intel. We've been speaking about threat landscape with a scope. As Aaron mentioned, if you don't know your adversary, it's very hard for you to understand what they are trying to achieve and how to respond to that threat. So full intel is fully embedded on our platform directly for any customer that starts their journey either with endpoint security or with SIEM. As we go even further, we would be able to even interact with this workbench to be able to add additional information and understand how those correlations are being made for the events. Of course, we do have an events timeline that is going to share the same indicators from the graph, and it's going to tell us specifically in a chronological order what we need to understand, how this attack happened and how it was unfolded. And as we move forward, we need to see particularly how we can execute investigation and automation. Now, let's say in this particular case, we have a compromised account. That, of course, through the compromised account, the attacker was able to actually leverage and obtain access to that specific endpoint. If I am to automate the response, like in our case, I have a compromised account, of course, my first reaction would be to do a password reset to make sure that those credentials can no longer be used by the attacker, right? I can use directly in the workbench the workflow from Fusion SOAR. So that means for any type of activity that I have with Fusion SOAR, I would be able to actively leverage the password reset mechanism from the workflows available in here. As I've mentioned, Fusion SOAR is built in. It does not have an active subscription. It's offered to all of our customers. And most importantly, it's that type of automation that every SOC team should have. That's for identity. I'm resetting the password. But now, because that identity has been compromised and I know that this host is being compromised, I also have the possibility, as you can see, to use additional workflows like collect the Windows command line history, or of course, add that specific host under other certain attack group to be able to isolate it. But most importantly, I can also contain the threat. So you have this button here with network containment, which will mean that at this point in time, I'm completely isolating the host inside my network, but I'm also interrupting any type of communication with command and control servers that that specific attacker may have on my system. So I will restrict the network connectivity, which will save me time to continue my investigation, but most importantly, it will isolate the threat. And I can do that either manually, if you feel like it's this type of decision that you want to do, I can do it manually, but in the same time, I can also do it automatically through Fusion SOAR, through the workflows. So if there are certain attack patterns that have been identified for your environment, Fusion SOAR can take the action to isolate the host immediately. Now, how we can power this up with AI? As we move forward in the journey, we will see a button called Charlotte AI. So for Charlotte AI is the type of agent that is going to tell us specifically the analysis of the entire incident. how this happened, when it started, in which stage of the attack we are, and most importantly, what type of recommendations they have in order to pursue the investigation purpose. So this is just a small fraction of the capabilities. I'm going to show you like the full step as well. But this starts as a very good initial point. If you have a security team, imagine that you may have like a 24/7, or maybe no, on a work, just on the shift, during the normal hours. If you have security analysts that are layer 1 security analysts, they need to decide if this is an active threat, right? Or if it needs to be escalated because it's becoming like a high or critical threat. But look, you are putting this responsibility to a SOC analyst layer 1, so to the person that has less experience from your entire team. And they are deciding this for you, right? So this is like very paradox. But in the same time, imagine if the agent, the AI assistant itself, can guide them and tell them, look, this is what is happening, this is how critical it is, these are the steps that you need to perform. This is the time when you need to escalate it to a senior level to be able to actively work on that investigation. That's the first part. The second part is the fact that after you have this fundamental understanding, you would be able to also prioritize on the threats. So let's say you have successfully ended the investigation and the response process here, but in the same time, you want to be proactive. And for being proactive, there's two ways. One is, of course, performing constant threat hunting activities to tackle for all the environment to understand where the active threat can happen. But most importantly, you also need to have like an orientated approach on using the correlation rules on top of first and third party data as well. For us, this reflects back in the detection coverage, where we can clearly see for each micro attack framework, for tactic and for technique, where are you mapping and what is your entire security posture. We embed by default rules and templates for correlation rules on top of first and third party data. That means for you, adoption means enabling that rule. So there's nothing more. If you want to also stay focused, for example, on specific threat actors that we know may target your environment, and now think about the names that Aaron just shared with you. With that specific group of adversaries that are focused on financial sector in Nigeria, you can start your proactive security posture by searching what are the adversaries' TTPs, how they are achieving successfully their attacks. If I have that adversary in mind, okay, what is my rule coverage in NGSIEM to be able to respond to that specific threat? Once I have this understanding, then I would be able to just take in consideration the security posture overall. Now, today in Falcon NGSIEM, we are offering nearly 2,000 out-of-the-box rule templates for our customers. It's just a matter of them analyzing and enabling them for their environment to increase their full visibility on the detection coverage. This is like the let's say the process itself when it comes to leveraging the SOC operations. Now, for threat response, we need to go into the AI part to embed AI in responding to those threats at the machine speed. Now, if you look at this picture, you may recognize the structure of your security team. You may have a tier 1 analyst, tier 2, tier 3. You may have detection engineering team, threat hunting, incident response, forensics, malware analysis, vulnerability analysis. In a, let's say in a ideal world, we will have like a massive structure of people and resources with a lot of expertise that they can manage our security operations center, right? But the reality on our customer side, no matter the let's say the country or the region, I've been working in Europe and I could see now in EMETA that it's very similar with the type of customers that we are interacting with. This ideal framework is not necessarily a reality for them in their organization. So what we are trying to do for our customer is to help them move into the agentic SOC When this particular functions, again, I'm emphasizing, it's about function itself, it's not about the person. It's being superpowered by an agent itself. That means that you as a security analyst will be doing your job, but you will also be leveraging an agent that can help you to speed up everything that you are doing on a daily basis. And that means for the security managers, for the SOC manager, for the CISO, for the CTO, that they will no longer manage only people, they will also manage people plus AI agents. And they need to control how those agents are actively being operated on a daily basis inside their environment. So for us, it means that with Charlotte AI Superpower, we have built different type of agents that are leveraging the classical or the traditional functions in the SOC to be able to provide that level of expertise to the end employee, so to the person itself. And we will have like agent input, triage agent, agentic response, vulnerability agent, threat hunting agent. So all those key functions that most frequently is taking a lot of time and a lot of resources for a person to actually navigate through. So if we are to see it in person, I will just share with you guys a short demonstration in a second.
CrowdStrike, Charlotte AI. Security teams are under constant pressure. Attacks are faster, stealthier, and more sophisticated than ever. Meanwhile, defenders are expected to triage faster, respond smarter, and make critical decisions, all in real time. Charlotte AI is a purpose-built AI analyst that helps shift the balance of power back to defenders, enabling security teams to close critical labor gaps, skills gaps, and response gaps. Leveraging industry-leading agentic and generative AI, Charlotte AI helps teams by offloading time-intensive tasks, accelerating decision-making, and helping teams stay ahead of fast-moving threats. With deep integrations across the Falcon platform, Charlotte AI applies reasoning with the speed, scale, and precision modern operations demand, all powered by CrowdStrike's world-class threat intelligence and expertise. So how does it work? When a new detection appears, Charlotte AI automatically analyzes related indicators, behaviors, historical context, and environmental signals, saving teams at least 5 minutes of analyst work with every detection. It determines whether an alert is a true or false positive, explains its reasoning, and recommends whether it should be closed or escalated for review. If it recommends a detection should be escalated, Charlotte AI can help drive your investigation, asking and answering follow-up questions based on the investigative expertise of Falcon Complete, saving teams at least another 10 to 15 minutes in every investigation. Charlotte AI also enables you to take intelligent action, transforming static playbooks into intelligent, adaptive workflows. Instead of rigid logic paths, you're now activating AI-powered reasoning in your workflows, all while staying in control. At every turn, the analyst directs what information Charlotte AI uses and what actions it can take, guided by your organization's policies, risk posture, and goals. Want to stay hands-on? Charlotte AI brings timely, actionable insights right into the detection flow. Start with dynamic incident maps that show the full scope and impact, how the attack unfolded, where it moved, and what's at risk. Then drill into the details with clear explanations of unfamiliar command lines, giving you fast clarity on what's happening. Charlotte AI also guides you through detailed investigations of incidents, automatically connecting related detections and behaviors so you see the full narrative, not just isolated alerts. And it acts as a conversational interface to your Falcon modules, turning plain language questions into actionable insights. AI should be powerful and accountable. Charlotte AI is built with guardrails that keep your team in control. First, Charlotte AI acts with bounded autonomy, so security teams define what it can do and when. Second, it's governed by role-based access controls, limiting unauthorized exposure. And finally, it provides transparent answer details, so users can inspect the underlying source data of every answer. Contact us to learn more about Charlotte AI.
All right, so that's the, let's say, the experience of what we consider agentic SOC. So being able to actually leverage AI in such a way that we will superpower our SOC teams to actively respond and contain any type of emerging threats that may, of course, target your organizations. Now, Aaron, I need your help to see if there are any questions for this part of the presentation. All right, I think there are none, so we should be good to go for the second part. So now let's say you guys are building, you are focusing, for example, on the AI native SOC. We have already covered the topic, but what if for the AI adoption, you are currently trying to secure the AI everywhere? So it means that instead of you just leveraging for the SOC, we shift a little bit like different on a different topic to understand what if you are an organization that on a daily basis leverages AI in different forms. That can be you just, I don't know, using Claude